Hi, I'm Angela Morton with the Recovery's Community NWPA Grant Project through the Rural Communities Opioid Response Program. We work in Northwestern Pennsylvania to address substance use and increase access to treatment, prevention, and recovery supports. I'm here today with our project director, who's also the Director of Clinical Care Services at UPMC Western Behavioral Health at Safe Harbor. This is Dr. Mandy Fauble, and we're joined by Trooper McGee from the Franklin, Pennsylvania State Police Barracks as the community service officer for that area. We'd love some perspective on law enforcement engagement in the community with folks who are struggling with substance use. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks for
Thank you
having
so
me.
much. Yeah, thanks for being here.
So
Yeah,
tell
absolutely.
us a little about your role and the things that you do in the community and in your work, and tell us a little about your history and what brings you here.
Thanks, Angela. So, yes, my position is the community service officer, and I really enjoy it. It's quite different than my previous experience in patrol. So, just to give you a little bit of background on what got me here today, I started my career with the state police, and I worked just about 8 years in patrol, which is answering the calls, responding to incidents, just what everyone thinks of when they think of police work. In the fall of 2010, the position of community service officer opened, and I was lucky enough to get it. I worked for 2 years in Meadville at the Meadville station, and then was able to transition to come back to Franklin in Venango County. And this is where I'm from, so it was really important, and I feel very worthwhile to be able to be in the community in kind of a different role, but the community in which I live and where I grew up, and being with the state police, and that is it's pretty worthwhile. And I enjoy being in the community and seeing the people that I've known, basically my whole life. And now it's just in a different way.
That sounds like such a special relationship you have with the community. But I was kind of thinking about how, it sounds like kind of live and thrive in your community. So you probably have all these positive experiences and must enjoy living there since you went back and you said it's really worthwhile. Yet you also see some of the difficult things in your own community related to people struggling with substance use and trying to find recovery. And I'm just wondering if you can give some insight into kind of what your experience has been in your community from a law enforcement standpoint.
Oh, absolutely. I think what's important, maybe other people in our community have this perspective. I grew up here as a child, and maybe, I grew up in a little bit of a rose-colored type perspective, not realizing the problems and the issues that even our community have. And so once I did get on this job and was out in the community, realizing that there's more to it. There are more people struggling than we might realize, and it is important. I think a healthy community is important for everyone, and so we can't just live in this in a bubble and think, oh, that doesn't happen here, or other people aren't, maybe they're not struggling. Oh, I can just kind of turn my eye to it. I think it's really important for everyone to realize that it's beneficial for everyone to have a healthy community, especially, addiction and crimes, that can affect everyone. So it's important for everybody to kind of be aware and know that there might be things they can do as well.
Agree. I'm so glad you said that it affects everyone, because I think sometimes even that language of like a victimless crime, I think, well, as a taxpayer, I face some burden of every crime, right? I mean, anyone that pays taxes, or anyone who's thinking about protecting their own safety, we're all impacted by crime, even when we hear about it, if it's scary or if it creates a little bit of anxiety for us, or it can be tied to home value. And there are all these ways that crime affects us all. And certainly then underneath that, there's this like human cost of how hard it is when our own families or in our friends, people that we know, are struggling. So I'm so glad you made that connection to kind of how a healthy community really benefits everyone. And on the flip side, when you have these struggles, that affects everyone too. Do you want to talk some about kind of just like a little bit more in depth about what you have seen in terms of trends and experiences with substance use in the community, and, however you find your way to it, even talking some about what you've seen law enforcement response kind of the changes you've seen over the years in response to the substance use epidemic, really, that we've experienced.
Sure. Certainly in my patrol days, it was quite a different view than what I have now. When you go into a home and maybe you see, there are young children in the home, that always brings a little extra caution to everybody when you think, okay, how are these children being affected by the drug use that they may be witnessing, or they may be observing, and are they being properly cared for? So there's the element of the children in a home, as well as, we might even go to, I say we generally, but the patrol, they might be going to a call for a theft. And here they, through the course of the investigation, realize that the person has committed that theft because they're trying to obtain items to sell for quick exchange of cash, and the cash is for them to purchase additional drugs. And so drug use and addiction really ties into so much of what law enforcement is seeing.
Well, and thank you for that perspective. And I think it's important to note, as you said, that you had mentioned to us in other conversations that a large percentage of your calls, if not more than half, end up being related to substance use, without giving exact numbers. But that's not just a matter of, I feel the need to say, just for educational purposes or awareness purposes, that it's not just to, quote, get high. There are people trying to get through withdrawal when they become addicted. So in that effort to make that withdrawal go away, not to excuse it, but they are committing crimes that then you become part of that picture because they're being arrested for things associated with their drug use.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that. Even something as simple as a retail theft, it could be a burglary, home burglaries. We've had those types of cases, robberies, you name it, even maybe some domestic issues where, the domestic incident has occurred because they're, under the influence of something which caused that issue to even start in the beginning. So there really is a lot that ties into that drug use that I never realized was so pervasive in our community.
How have you seen the law enforcement response to this change during the course of your career? Because you've been, it sounds like in your various roles with PSP for some time. So you've probably seen some changes in approach and even gone through some yourself.
Oh, sure. So an example of that would be, Venango County beginning and starting a problem-solving court, which in some other counties it might be referred to as a drug court or a treatment court. For anyone who's not aware of what that is, it is a court system that is very intensive. It's treatment-oriented with multiple people from the community as part of the staff, and the participants, it's completely voluntary. So they enter into this program having had some sort of, well, they have to be high risk, high need, but having had some sort of criminal incident that took place, that instead of perhaps just going to jail, they enter into this problem solving court. And it's pretty intensive. Like I said, it involves office visits, it involves treatment, it involves meetings, it involves a lot of different elements to try to get that person to a point where they are law abiding, productive members of the community, and they are no longer letting substance use affect and direct their lives. So that has been probably the biggest shift that I have seen within this county, is that problem solving court is an option. And it's not just that you commit a crime, you go to jail, you get out, commit the crime again, or a different crime, you go back to jail. And that what we call recidivism, that repeat offender, is no longer offending, no longer committing crimes, because they've been able to become, like I said, law-abiding citizens who are no longer addicted to their drug of choice previously.
Yeah, it sounds almost like if a person was wondering, well, why would you give them this easy way out of treatment court? You're kind of describing it doesn't sound that easy. It sounds like you have to do all kinds of things. And I would imagine if you don't, then, you'd run the risk, then you'd be incarcerated. Do I understand that correctly? It's like you succeed in treatment court, or you would deal with whatever the consequences of the crime were in a more legal way.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because even among law enforcement, problem-solving court is not an easy sell, right? I mean, there's this perspective that you break the law, you pay the price, and it's a consequence. And that, sure, to a certain degree, that is absolutely correct. What this program allows is, like I said, the person has to completely voluntarily agree to, they sign the contract. They are a part of it by choice because they want to have a better life. Now, there are some participants who they maybe initially join because they just don't want to do their jail time. And, certainly that's been observed. And then what's been interesting with that, is the course of the program, they get to graduation, and somewhere along the line, they buy into the program. They start to trust the treatment providers. They start to feel better. They start to see this light that they maybe couldn't see before when they were in addiction. And so I find it rewarding to see that. Again, it's not always something everybody says, it's just a slap on the wrist. In my experience, I think it's actually maybe a little more intensive, because they can be put on electronic monitoring or house arrest, or, I mean, very similar to some of the different protocols that are put in place, within the court system. This is a court system. It's just not as punitive. It's not just sitting in jail to spend your time and then get out, but there's no treatment within that, or there's no actual addressing of what the issue is, why that person is in jail. If that answers your question.
It definitely does, and I'm so glad you explained more. I'm a believer, I think treatment court is there's a lot of evidence in terms of success and offering people different opportunities. And I think it's so wonderful to do something that, instead of that pattern that you described of sometimes, an arrest, and then we're arresting the person again, we're arresting the person again. And it's like, how do we break that cycle? It just provides a different option. And I remember actually meeting a person in recovery once that told me that their recovery story began with what they described as a nudge from a judge. And I thought that's like the best expression. And it really opened my thinking so much into the partnership that sometimes develops reluctantly. But I too have seen what you described, Trooper McGee, in terms of that person that, like, they're not so sure and they really just don't want to go to jail. But then over time, it truly becomes the root of recovery. That is much more about just their ability to reconnect to their life again. And I think treatment court, or problem solving court in the case of Venango County, it just gives people, and it gives them more choices, of, like you said, getting your life back. I mean, that's good stuff,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see that, some of the different participants, maybe they get their children back. Again, it's all very monitored. So it's not that they're a part of the program and then, okay, we'll see you next week. There are program coordinators who are very much overseeing pretty much every aspect of their life. And then throughout the phasing of the program, trying to get them employment, housing, if they need to try to, over the course of their time, they get their license back, which in turn allows for better opportunities because they progress throughout the whole thing. And every participant has their own course. So it's not hard and fast, and that you start in January, you're going to be done by December. It's a completely open enrollment at any time, and referrals are made at any given time, and every person kind of stays in their own lane, or they're supposed to, right? Realizing what they need to do, and that is their program. So the phasing has a certain guideline as to how many days they're in phase 1 versus phase 2, but everybody's different, and they have to show that progression for themselves before phasing, which then obviously the goal of the whole program is the culmination and graduating throughout that program. But everybody's program is different, so it could be 2 years, it could be 3 years. So again, that's pretty intensive when you're thinking you would be looking at a shorter jail time, but now you're voluntarily in this program. However, the outcome could be so much greater in the end.
It's so cool. That
is
it's
the
like
best. That's
win-win.
Like you just pulled it all together, that for people that have a choice to make, that you can have a shorter sentence and just do the time and get it over with, or to invest the time and energy to engage in that process. It does take some effort. It's not just, quote, an easy way out. But you had said something also about how there are just mixed views about that in society, because I want to shout out to all officers out there doing this work and all the people who are struggling. So I stand on the bridge to bring all of that together. But there are people who see firsthand how addiction impacts families and society. And so many people have said they have what we call compassion fatigue, where you're trying to address in the behavioral health world, in law enforcement world, that when you go through these things and see them again and again, that it can be really challenging emotionally to watch and to not know where to turn. So we want to make sure that we're kind of shedding some light on there are places to turn. So people can get help through the problem solving court. People can reach out to their, whether you're an employee and need employee assistance, to talk about some of what you're seeing on the front lines. And if you're somebody who's struggling with substance use, it's very much what we do, is get people connected. So before we close, I think we probably have a few minutes to just wrap up a few more things, but I want to make sure that people know where to get help if they need it. So if someone happens to be listening, maybe afraid to reach out, maybe you've talked about your substance use or you have not, or somebody has maybe talked to you about it and you've struggled with where to go, you can get treatment regardless of your ability to pay for treatment. So you can call nationally to an 800 number, 1-800-662-HELP, and that is a mental health and substance use helpline to get connected to treatment. But locally, you can call your local substance use program at your county facility and ask them for substance use help, and they can get you connected to someone there. So you can call your local county office to ask for substance use treatment, and they can do an assessment and get connected to whatever level of treatment is needed. Some people need some outpatient counseling. Some people need intensive outpatient that brings another level of like group and individual treatment, and some people need rehab. So getting connected and then having these kind of resources on the law enforcement end, if you do happen to have charges, to know that there are options, I think is just really, really important.
Same. And I think, Trooper McGee, I have to say, when I see anybody from PSP, I just think of highways and all that driving. And that makes me think about how much alcohol use has spiked over the last couple of years. And we spend so much time in recovery is sometimes talking about opioids and overdose deaths related to opioids really went up. It has gone up throughout the pandemic. We had record-breaking numbers of overdose deaths recently, but we also actually saw a 25% increase in deaths from alcohol. And again, thinking of you driving around, I'm often thinking of like DUI, right? And alcohol use is something that it is so important for us to keep talking about too. So Angela, when you're saying, do you need help, or has somebody mentioned something to you, I want to make sure that we acknowledge that alcohol is also sometimes a concern for people.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, I would agree with that. And, our DUI numbers, we might have that it's under, you see there's so many more drug-related DUIs, but there's still alcohol. So even though we may focus more on one issue, that doesn't mean the other issue has gone away. So you're right, Dr. Fauble. And it's all we can do is try to be involved and get the word out and have some awareness. And I did want to mention, I don't know if I did, my involvement with problem solving court is not an enforcement role. So, I'm not there to enforce and make sure that the participants are, coming in a certain way. I'm just there as more of a law enforcement representative, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. It does. I think you've really emphasized, throughout today's conversation, your commitment to your community, which I know is you really are here representing many people that work in law enforcement. And I love that, that commitment to the community, and also thinking of police work is so much more than what we might see on TV or what we imagine it is with a simple, sort of arrest and processing concept. Really, our law enforcement agencies do so much to prevent issues in our community and address them when they do happen in a whole host of ways. So I'm really grateful for the time, that we had with you. And I know Angela already gave a shout out, but I shared the same feelings. I think that many times when we say first responder, we forget what that really means to be right there, saving a life or dealing with something that's very scary for someone, and making a big impact on what someone's brush with a recovery opportunity might feel like. So thank you for doing that very, very important work. People in the community, we put our lives in the hands of first responders, and you all do just such a great job in so many ways. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And of course, maybe this is how I'll end it, that, recreational drug use is still illegal, and it is still against the law. And state police and local police, we're still going to do the job of enforcing the law. But there's just another layer there where, that particular person who might need it can reach out and get help, and anyone can make that referral.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for wrapping it into that important piece of information. So we do appreciate you being here, and for all the work you're doing in the community and just everywhere. Schools, you're out there doing the lunch programs with Venango County at the schools to engage with youth. And that's that extra level of prevention, to get out there and talk to youth about substance use and to let people know where they can get help. Do either of you have any final thoughts?
No, thank you for your
No.
time.
I agree.
Thanks.
Thank you. This is great.
Thanks so much for your law enforcement perspective on recovery is.